headliner. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here with the Fantasy Headliners, and that game last night was absolutely crazy. Just as crazy as my time with Jake in North Carolina, but I am back in my normal house in Illinois. Not nearly as exciting as Jake's house, but you guys know the deal. It's time for our injury update show for week 14. As always, brought to you by our boys over at Fantrax. Make sure you download the Fantrax app. Let them know that the Headliners sent you. But let's get into it. Week 14 injury update show, the show where I tell you all the injuries you need to know for your fantasy teams. Let's go. All right, guys, we got to start this episode off, as always, with a moment of silence. This is when a guy gets ruled out for the rest of the fantasy season. And this week, we got a little special non-NFL moment of silence. Let's all take a moment of silence for Tater Miles, who got taken out to the trash when he tried to accuse the doc of trying to steal his job. What? That guy doesn't even have a job. Look at how he dresses. Clearly not somebody who you need to be taking weather advice from. But I imagine Jake will probably drag him out of the dump just to bring him back this week. But Tater Miles should be done for the fantasy season. If you don't know what I'm talking about, make sure you go back to Week 13's Weekend Tailgate Show, and you can see just what happens when you mess with the doc. But let's move on to some actual NFL players, guys that really matter for your fantasy teams. And starting up first, we got Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford. We got some clarification on the injury that he was dealing with. It is a spinal cord contusion. I said it was strange that a neck injury was causing numbness in his legs. It turns out it was more serious than the Rams had initially led on. I'm not surprised, given that it was a spinal cord injury, that this was something that was causing symptoms further down in his legs. Normally, when you're talking about like a nerve root out of the neck, it's going to affect the arms and the neck. It's not going to be felt in the legs. So the fact that this was a central spinal cord contusion does tell us why he was having symptoms in his leg. And the problem is that a bruised spinal cord can take several months to heal. And the team has already said that they are shutting Stafford down for this season. We're going to see if Baker Mayfield can come through week after week. Huge game last night for Baker Mayfield. Huge last couple drives at least. So we'll see if he can maybe salvage his career with the Rams as they finish up their season, but they're pretty much out of the playoff race now. 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo dealing with a foot fracture, not a Liz Frank injury, but it is a fracture in his foot. Got his foot wrapped up under a tackle and then broke one of the bones in his ankle/foot. It's kind of in between the two, so some people call it an ankle bone, some people call it a foot bone. The team has not ruled him out for the season yet. They do think he might be able to come back for the playoffs, but I'm going to rule him out for the fantasy season as he is projected to miss about 6 to 8 weeks. Bills linebacker Von Miller thought he avoided an ACL tear when he was initially diagnosed with only a meniscus tear. The problem is when they get in there, sometimes they find more damage, and that's what happened with Von Miller. He does have an ACL tear along with that lateral meniscus tear, so we don't expect him to be back this season as they had to repair that ACL. It's probably more of a reconstruction, but the reports are repair, so I'm going to use that. But it's just know that it's probably more of a reconstruction. They don't usually repair the ACL. And then Cowboys starting cornerback Anthony Brown, one of the better tackling corners in the league, is done for the year with an Achilles tear. Left the game, and reports are that this Achilles is torn, so we may not even see him to start next year. Brutal break for the Cowboys defense as he was one of the better tacklers on the team and just a really solid corner week to week. So let's get some pour one out emojis in the chat for these dudes, and let's move on to our week 13 accuracy recap. Week 13 was not a bad week for me, kind of middle of the road, 88% on the in-out calls last week, 88% on the year this year, so I'm right on pace. Did have some misses, though. I was surprised that Najee Harris, Jerry Jeudy, Julian Okwara, Antonio Gibson, Jeffrey Simmons, and Jameson Williams all managed to play last week. None of those guys were any better than RB25. Jerry Jeudy was wide receiver 38. Antonio Gibson was RB 37. And Jameson Williams didn't have any points. So no real huge fantasy days, but I was a little bit surprised by that. And then Joe Mixon did not pass concussion protocol. I warned you guys last week that he had not done that yet, even though he's practicing limited. But I was still surprised that he didn't get passed through that concussion protocol before Sunday, so he sat out. I did tell you guys, sadly, to fade the Jets running backs. Zonovan Knight finished as the RB 13. Big week for him. And then Ty Johnson finished as the RB 36. I did say I expected Johnson to catch quite a few passes. He was third on the team in targets and receiving yards. So I'll take a mini win there. And then I am just this one hurt me bad. But during the live stream with Jake, live stream together, I was really bullish on Chris Olave. Thought that he was going to have a huge line with the Bucs missing multiple guys in their secondary. Sadly, the big plays went to Rashid Shaheed. I didn't even know that was a player in the NFL. Not even going to lie to you guys. And the team kind of kept a lead the whole time, so I was surprised the Saints were not playing from behind. Those are the reasons I thought that Chris Olave was going to pop off. He didn't, so sadly, I was wrong on that, so I am sorry about that one. That was a rough call for me, but I did have some hits last week. Hopefully you guys listened to some of the advice, at least the good parts, and then did not trust Travis Etienne last week. He finished with just 6.1 half PPR points, RB 39 on the week. My prize pick play of the week did hit on the over. I said Brian Robinson over 63.5 yards, finished with 96 rushing yards. So hopefully you guys made a bet on prize pick, won a little bit of money, courtesy of the doc. Big CMC week. I expected him to play well without Elijah Mitchell, and he did. Finished as the RB1 overall in half PPR scoring. I also expected the San Francisco defense to dominate Miami's offensive line without their 2 starting tackles. They did finish with 3 sacks and also helped force 3 interceptions to keep the Dolphins running backs at bay as well, with only 33 total yards as the running back. So that was a big hit for me. Told you guys to avoid everything involved with that offensive line. Hopefully you did not start your Dolphins running backs last week. I did tell you guys to start Isaiah Pacheco, finished as the RB11. Another solid week for him. He's just one of those guys that he's not like CH. He is going to punch in some touchdowns week to week, and he did so last week. I told you guys not to worry about Josh Jacobs, finished as the RB3 on the week, had another great game last night. So let's just pretend that this calf injury was never really reported. And then I was a little bullish on Garrett Wilson last week on the live stream. Jake and I were both very in on Garrett Wilson. I told you guys that he plays really, really well when Zach Wilson is not the quarterback. Figured he would be a solid starter last week. He even outperformed that expectation, finished as the wide receiver 9 on the week. And I told you guys I would start Leonard Fournette. I figured he would be used in the passing game. He had a decent game, not an amazing game, but still finished as an RB2. So hopefully you guys did start him now that he is healthy. All right, guys, let's get into it. This week we got 6 teams on bye Mageddon. So the Falcons, Bears, Packers, Colts, Saints, and Commanders. Not going to talk about those guys. We don't have time for it. If you want to hear about somebody from those teams, let me know in the comments down below. But we're going to go right into Thursday Night Football. A little bit of recap. Obviously an absolutely insane game. Baker Mayfield showing up big. But the only one that we really need to talk about here is defensive lineman Aaron Donald for the Rams, dealing with that ankle sprain. Still not practicing or playing. I'm still not convinced that this guy is going to be shut down for the year. But with nearly the entire offense done for the year, I still think it is a possibility that the team will intentionally shut Aaron Donald down. I just don't think he's a guy that's going to not play. I think if he can play, he's going to be playing. He has some career goals in mind, and the dude is the best defender on the planet when he is healthy. That's not named TJ Watt, obviously. Moving on to the Jets at the Bills. Jets running back Michael Carter, dealing with that ankle sprain, is off the injury report after missing 2 games. He should be back this week. We'll see how that affects Zonovan Knight, who has actually played really, really well. It looks like he maybe should be the starter, but we will see. And then the Jets do have a few players dealing with illness in the locker room, but no one important yet. So just going to keep an eye on that and let you guys know if anybody shows up sick in the Jets locker room that we need to know about for fantasy purposes. The Bills linebacker Matt Milano dealing with a knee injury, has not practiced yet this week, but the injury was described as day-to-day, so there's still a pretty good chance that he could play. If he gets working on Friday, I think he suits up. And then nose tackle Jordan Phillips dealing with a shoulder sprain, went down really hard last Thursday trying to sack Mac Jones at the end of the game, left the game, and now hasn't practiced all week. That is a big, big dude landing with all of his weight on his shoulder. It was kind of an awkward landing too, so I would not be surprised if he does not play this week. So a little bit of defensive struggles for the Bills, but overall the team is getting pretty healthy. A good sign for anybody looking to start any Bills offensive players. Heading over to the Browns at the Bengals. Browns tight end David Njoku dealing with a knee sprain. He missed Deshaun Watson's debut, and I was watching Red Zone with Jake last week, and we may have also missed Watson's debut because I don't know if he was ever in the red zone as an offensive player, but regardless, his knee sprain, that's David Njoku's, appears to be improving because he is practicing in a limited capacity. I do expect him to return this week. And then Bengals tight end Hayden Hurst also dealing with an injury, got a calf strain. Has not practiced after leaving Sunday's game with this injury. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to play this week, so I doubt that we see him on Sunday, just because I just don't think he's going to be able to practice. And when guys aren't practicing, I just do not expect them to play. Wide receiver T. Higgins dealing with a hamstring strain. Popped up on the injury report on Thursday with this. Kind of a new issue, so it's hard to say exactly what's going on. Wasn't listed on Wednesday, but based on reports, this isn't really something serious. They are treating it, and it is limiting his reps in practice, but I still think T. Higgins should be good to go. And then running back Joe Mixon dealing with that concussion is back practicing in full. He should be back this week. We'll see how they work him in with Samaje Perine. I do think Mixon is going to have the bulk of the carries when he comes back because he was the starter. Heading over to the Texans at the Cowboys. Texans cornerback Derek Stingley Jr. has been out for a while with a hamstring injury. He's still not practicing. Does not look like he is going to be able to come back for this game. And then two wide receivers for the Texans I'm worried about. Nico Collins dealing with a foot sprain, and then Brandon Cooks dealing with a calf strain. Neither one of those guys practicing this week. Look unlikely that they will play as well. So just start the Cowboys and just avoid the Texans altogether. I just don't know who's going to catch passes for them, and I don't really care because I don't think that the offense is good enough. It sounds like they're going back to Davis Mills. I don't really know. That offense is terrible. Bet the Cowboys money line. Whatever you want to do, the Cowboys are almost for sure going to win this game. For the Cowboys, though, they don't really have any new injuries to talk about, but we do have some good news for them. They do expect both left tackle Tyron Smith and wide receiver James Washington to return from IR soon. I don't expect either of those guys to be back this week, but I do think that Tyron Smith could be back as soon as next week. They did sign Jason Peters to come in and kind of fill that role while he was out. So let's see what that offensive line looks like with two future potential Hall of Fame tackles on it. I mean, that could be just an absolute insane end of the season stretch for the running backs there. Moving on to the Vikings at the Lions. Vikings, the linebacker Daniel Hunter dealing with illness. They have 5 guys on the injury report right now with illness, but the most important guy here is Hunter. Has not practiced yet. Going to be a game time decision on Sunday. Offensive tackle Christian Darrisaw missed 2 games with a concussion, and concussion in back-to-back weeks, so that's why he's been missing multiple games with this as they're trying to work him back. He's been limited in practice. No official word yet on if he has cleared protocol, though, so just keep an eye on it. I know offensive linemen don't score points, but Christian Darrisaw is one of the best tackles in the game, so having him back would be huge for this offense. As for the Lions, they got quite a few guys on the injury report, but the one I'm worried about the most is cornerback Jeff Okudah. He is sick, dealing with a lot of sickness in the locker room for the Lions as well. 3 guys missing time, but Jeff Okudah is the one I'm the most concerned about. If he were to sit, I'm not really totally sure who the Lions would use to guard Justin Jefferson, but I do believe that whoever they do choose, if it's not Okudah, is going to have a really, really bad day. Heading over to the Eagles at the Giants. Eagles are one of the healthiest teams in the league, and that's why they keep winning. The Giants, though, running back Saquon Barkley is dealing with a neck injury. Not much to go on here as it just showed up on Thursday, but he was limited. I still think that this is probably nothing. He's going to play, but their O-line is still beat up. Shane Lemieux dealing with a toe injury. Joshua Ezeude dealing with a neck injury. A lot of neck injuries here for the Giants because we got another one that I'll talk about here in Leonard Williams. But those two offensive linemen are both out of practice. Doesn't look like they're going to be back this week. As for Leonard Williams, he's not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to be back. So 3 different neck injuries, kind of a unique injury designation for the Giants. They are beat up right now. Cornerback Adoree Jackson also dealing with a knee sprain. Didn't play last week. Isn't practicing. Don't expect him to play this week, which is going to open up A.J. Brown, who is my Prize Pick Play of the Week. Head on over to Prize Picks. Use the code HEADLINERS. Get a free first deposit match up to $100 and use some of that money to go grab A.J. Brown over 5 receptions. I think he's going to have a big catching day. I'm going to guess probably closer to like 7 to 9 receptions for A.J. Brown. Paired up this week with Justin Herbert, who our friends at Prize Pick have generously given us a improved prop of just 0.5 passing yards. So you can pair those two guys up and basically lock yourself in to some money. Make sure you do that. Grab the over, obviously, on that Justin Herbert prop as well. Heading over to the Ravens at my Steelers. Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, probably the biggest injury from last week. I know that it hurt a lot of people in fantasy. He has a PCL sprain. The PCL does heal well, so it is not likely to need surgery, but it does take some time to do that. I say it's unlikely that we see Jackson for a few weeks here, but I don't necessarily think that his season is over quite yet, so don't drop him from your fantasy teams. They have not put him on IR yet, so I still think there's a chance he could be back at some point in the fantasy playoffs. The Steelers running back Najee Harris came back, was surprised by this last week with his oblique sprain. I didn't expect him to be able to play. He is still practicing in a limited capacity, so he's not 100%. If you have other option, I'm maybe considering sitting him this week just because the Ravens defense is going to be looking to take away Najee Harris. Wide receiver Deontay Johnson's dealing with a hip injury, got downgraded from limited to a DNP Thursday with this hip injury that's bothered him a few different times this year. Nothing that has cost him games, but I don't really know exactly what's going on with this hip. I don't think that it's going to cost him this week, but just know that he was showing up on the injury report with that. Could limit his upside a little bit. He's been pretty hit or miss for fantasy, so you're probably finding other options anyway. And then linebacker TJ Watt dealing with a rib contusion. Watt has battled all sorts of injuries this year, but the rib injury is the newest one. I still think he's likely to play through this. It's a really big game for the Steelers. They need to win. They're trying to get into the playoffs still. Hard to believe as a Steelers fan, but they still have a chance to make the playoffs. The Ravens are hurting without their quarterback, so I think TJ Watt is going to kind of fight through this and play. Moving on to the Jaguars at the Titans. Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence is dealing with a toe injury. This one was just absolute insanity. I watched it with Jake. I said, oh my gosh, that is terrible. His leg twisted in a way that legs are not supposed to be twisting. It twisted in a way that normally ends seasons and sometimes even careers. That's how messed up his leg looked on this replay. When I was watching it live, I told Jake, I'm like, dude, that is not good. This is a very, very bad issue. And then he went to the locker room and then he was jogging back out at halftime. Could not believe it. Unbelievable luck that he, managed to come back at all. Didn't really seem to have any major issues from that hit. Just kind of got his foot caught under the guy. I just couldn't believe it. Absolute insanity from Trevor Lawrence. Dude is made of bubble gum. But he has not practiced this week, dealing with what is now being called a toe injury. Started as a knee, went to ankle, now it's toe. It's just kind of fading away, smaller and smaller areas. Technically, he's a game time decision for me, but I still think he plays this week. As for the Titans, wide receiver Treylon Burks, who's been dealing with injuries all year, got hit super hard. Probably one of the hardest hits in the whole entire league last week, but still managed to catch that touchdown. I can't believe he held on to it. Looked like it hit him, knocked him out, but he managed to hold on to that ball, caught that touchdown, but left the game with a concussion. Hasn't practiced. Doesn't look like we're going to see him this week. And then the Titans defense is really banged up. Lots of defenders missing multiple days of practice this week. Cornerbacks Christian Fulton, Trey Avery, linebacker David Long, and then defensive ends Denico Autry and Jeffrey Simmons all looking questionable to play on Sunday. Moving over to the Chiefs at the Broncos. Chiefs only have wide receiver Kadarius Toney to worry about, dealing with a hamstring strain. He has missed 2 straight games, but the good news is that he is practicing in a limited capacity, should be able to return. I'm probably not starting him in fantasy, though. We know that highest injury re-injury risk with hamstrings is when they first come back. As for the Broncos, one of the most injured teams, if not the most injured team in the league. 17 guys on the injury report this week. That doesn't even include the guys that they've put on IR already. But the ones I'm worried about are wide receiver Courtland Sutton, dealing with a hamstring strain, left the game on Sunday, has not been practicing, doesn't look like he is going to be able to play. And then Jerry Jeudy, dealing with that ankle sprain, was limited this week. He's still kind of working back from that ankle injury. Don't think that he re-aggravated this. It's just them managing him. So the team is really, really beat up. I just don't see any way that the Broncos put up much of a fight against the Chiefs, even though their defense has kept them in a lot of games. I think the Chiefs could score 30-plus points against this Broncos defense. I think they're that good, and I think the Broncos are just that beat up. I don't think that they're going to have much will to defend home field with this Chiefs offense coming in. Heading over to the Panthers at the Seahawks. Panthers running back Deonta Foreman dealing with a foot sprain. Was a DNP Wednesday with this injury, but when he was asked if he would play, he emphatically told them that yes, he would be playing this week. He is hurting, but that interview, along with the positive practice reports of him being limited on Thursday, tell me he's startable against the Seattle run defense that has been let's just say not the greatest at stopping people from scoring points. As for the Seahawks, they got all sorts of injuries at the running back position as well. Kenneth Walker, DJ Dallas, both with ankle injuries. Both are expected to sit this week. So we're looking at Travis Homer and Tony Jones Jr. I kind of like Jones Jr. as like maybe a dart throw RB3, maybe even Homer in PPR leagues. He can catch some passes. But let's be honest, this team is going to run through Geno and the 2 wide receivers. So I would not blame anybody for sitting these running backs. Moving on to Tampa Bay at San Francisco. The Bucs still dealing with injuries in the secondary. Safety Mike Edwards with the hamstring, Antoine Winfield Jr. with the ankle. Both sidelined after missing last week's game. The Bucs did give up some big passing plays to the Saints, but the team only gave up 1 receiving touchdown. They clearly have a defense that's good enough to withstand any offensive attack without these 2 guys, but it is surprising that we haven't seen a team try to exploit them down the field a little bit more. I'm hoping maybe the 49ers can do that even without Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. As for the Bucs offensive tackle Tristan Wirfs, he's dealing with a high ankle sprain. He's working his way back, not practicing. Doesn't look like he'll play this week. Leonard Fournette with the hip pointer returned last week, managed to regain a lot of work in the backfield, which was surprising for me. I thought maybe Rachaad White had earned the bulk of the carries for that, but they're splitting them pretty even right now. I still think you can continue to use him as a volume pass catcher, and you're probably somebody that in PPR leagues is startable as kind of that low-end RB2. I don't really think either one of these running backs is going to do great against this 49ers defense, though. As for the 49ers, outside of Jimmy Garoppolo, who we already talked about in the moment of silence, Nick Bosa also dealing with an injury. He's got a hamstring strain. Not good for that defense because Bosa hasn't practiced at all, and he has a history of missing games due to injury. Both the Bosa brothers have a history of missing games, but I think this may be just more rest than actually a true injury. Coach Kyle Shanahan described it as an irritation, not as a true strain, and Bosa is putting together probably his best season in terms of trying to become the defensive player of the year. Both TJ Watt and Aaron Donald hurt. Those guys are kind of the front runners every year. So Nick Bosa wants to stay healthy. He doesn't want to be missing games due to injury so that he can make a run at that title, defensive player of the year. I think he could do it this year. So if you got a little bit of money, maybe throw at Nick Bosa, defensive player of the year, if you can find that prop anywhere. Heading on to the Sunday night football game, we got Dolphins at the Chargers. Dolphins pretty banged up right now. 15 players on the injury report this week. A lot of offensive guys on the injury report that I'm going to go through here. Quarterback Tua Tagovailoa dealing with an ankle sprain. Picked it up late in Sunday's game. Has been limited in practice all week, but there's still a good chance that he is able to play through this. Wide receiver Jalen Waddle left with a fibula injury. That's a bone for those of you guys who don't know. Tibia, fibula, they make up your shin. The fact that they mentioned fibula tells me that they thought that this was some type of possible break, but he left the game, came back after he got x-rays, but still a pretty brutal day. He really hurt fantasy teams last week, but he's practicing in full, so I guess you can still start him. He's still startable to me. Wide receiver Tyreek Hill dealing with an illness. He's not practicing, but we're going to have to keep you guys updated on his status. I don't think he is in line to miss this game because he got sick early in the week. A lot of offensive tackle news, and we saw that play out with the 49ers defense absolutely destroyed Tua, probably why he got hurt, missing both offensive tackles last week. One of those guys, Austin Jackson, with the ankle injury, was placed on IR. The team did sign former Chiefs offensive tackle and former number 1 overall pick Eric Fisher to fill in that gap, add a little bit of experience to a young offensive line. And then offensive tackle Teron Armstead, dealing with toe and pec injuries, missed last week, definitely showed for them, but he is at least practicing a limited capacity. It looks like he could be back for this game. They're not the only team with offensive line issues, though, because the Chargers offensive tackle Trey Pipkins dealing with that knee sprain, not practicing, does not look like he is likely to play this week. They also have safety Derwin James dealing with a quadriceps injury. Apparently he's dealt with this before this week, but never showed up on the injury report. Now he's not practicing at all. I would be surprised if he plays if he does not get practicing by Friday. But good news for the Chargers and for fantasy owners. Wide receiver Mike Williams dealing with a high ankle sprain. Really good news for him. He's practicing. He's back in full on Thursday. Expected to return on Sunday night. I'm slightly hesitant just because he burned us the last time he tried to come back. But I think if you need a big win, if you're going up against somebody that you don't think you can beat, I would still probably be throwing Mike Williams in because he's one of those guys that can absolutely explode for you. Does hurt Josh Palmer a little bit. I'm probably not starting him this week with Mike Williams coming back. Last game of the week, Monday Night Football, New England Patriots at the Arizona Cardinals. Patriots running back Damian Harris dealing with a thigh contusion, still not practicing. Doesn't look like he is going to be able to play, so big week for Ramondre Stevenson coming up. And then wide receiver Jacoby Myers left with a concussion. Most likely not going to be able to have him back either. Can he clear concussion protocol by Monday? Highly unlikely if he's not practicing on Thursday. Could open up some wide receiver 3 numbers maybe for Devontae Parker and puts Hunter Henry firmly in the not sexy tight end 1 tier, which is basically every tight end that's not named Travis Kelce. As for the Cardinals, they got some injuries at the wide receiver position. DeAndre Hopkins dealing with illness. Rarely missed games prior to last year. If there's anybody who's playing through being sick, it is DeAndre Hopkins. Wide receiver Rondale Moore dealing with that groin strain. Not practiced yet. Doesn't look like he is going to be able to play. And he wasn't probably fantasy viable. Now that Marquise Brown is back, DeAndre Hopkins is playing. Just doesn't seem like Rondale Moore has any targets to gain. And we got wide receiver Greg Dortch coming back from the thumb sprain, back practicing in full, should play more of a wide receiver 3 than a real fantasy difference maker, but he can pop. We've seen him pop in offenses before. If DeAndre Hopkins has a rough game because he's sick, I think Greg Dortch could come in and maybe possibly give you a big week as kind of a wide receiver 3-4 flex option. These are the types of guys that I know are not sexy to throw into your lineups, but my personal strategy, if I'm trying to win a week and I'm streaming somebody, is I want a guy like Greg Dortch who could maybe possibly get me 5 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. I'm not saying that he will do that. I'm just saying he could do that, and he probably is available in some, if not all, leagues that you're playing in because he's been hurt for a while, so he very easily could have been dropped. So that is the Week 14 injury update, and man, I need a drink. So that's it, guys. Week 14 injury update show is in the books. Let me know if I missed anybody down in the comments. I'm going to try to answer as many of those comments as I can before Sunday. Appreciate you guys sitting back, watching a little bit of injury show. I know it's not the most thrilling content in the world, but I do try to spice it up a little bit for you guys, and I hope you appreciate that effort. Want to thank our friends over at Fantrax for sponsoring the show. Same thing with Prize Picks. And if you're looking for something a little nice for your Christmas tree, head on over to Manscaped. Use the code headliners get 20% off and free shipping this holiday season. But that's it, guys. That's all I got for the Week 14 Injury Update show. The doc is out.